I bought my dad a brand new truck for his 60th birthday. At dinner, he raised his glass and said, "To my idiot daughter trying to buy love with money." Everyone laughed. I just stood up, smiled, and left without a word. The next morning, his driveway was empty, and my phone exploded with 88 missed calls. I remember the sound of that laughter like it's still echoing in my ears. Plates clinking, chairs scraping, my brother slapping the table. Mom tried to hush him, but even she smiled. I just stood there, hands trembling around the gift box the dealer had wrapped. The truck keys glinted under the light, and I thought how stupid I was to think a man like my father could be touched by something that came from me. That night, I didn't cry. I drove home with my window down, the cold air cutting across my face. Somewhere between the stoplight and my driveway, I stopped feeling hurt. What replaced it was silence, heavy, calm, dangerous. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Missed calls. My brother. My mom. My dad. I called Mom back. Her voice was tight, like she was trying not to breathe wrong. "Your father went for a drive," she said, "in the new truck." But his old car was still parked out front when I drove by. The driveway looked stripped naked. That's when it hit me. The truck was gone. Later that day, Caleb, my ex, called. He runs a mechanic shop outside town. He said, "Liv, your dad came by here a while ago asking about title transfers. Looked like he wanted to sell something." My chest went cold. I realized then that the whole thing had been planned. The toast, the joke, the performance, all of it. I went through his mail that night. Mom gave me the spare key to his study, her hand shaking as she said, "Maybe you should see for yourself. Bills. Foreclosure warnings." And tucked between them, a pink slip from his old truck, signed just 2 days before his birthday. I stared at the signature, his, not mine. The new truck was already up for sale. When I confronted him at the bar, he didn't even flinch. "You never could take a joke," he said, beer in hand. "You're too damn sensitive." The people around him went silent. "I traded the truck for something useful," he added, smirking. That was the moment something inside me clicked into place. Not rage, clarity. I walked out, got into my car, and called Caleb. By midnight, I knew where the truck was, who had it, and that my name was still on the paperwork. The next morning, the same driveway that once mocked me with its emptiness would soon become the reason his pride collapsed. I wasn't his idiot daughter anymore. I was his reckoning. When I woke up, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. 88 missed calls lit up the screen, Dad, Nate, Mom, over and over. My hands shook as I scrolled. I didn't even have to listen to know something was wrong. I threw on jeans, grabbed my keys, and drove straight across town. The streets were quiet, but my heart wasn't. When I turned onto my parents' street, I slowed down without meaning to. The moment I saw the driveway, my stomach dropped. The truck was gone. The space where it had sat last night looked almost fake, too clean, too empty. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. Her hair was a mess, and her robe was pulled tight like she was holding herself together. "He just went for a drive," she said quickly. "In what?" I asked, glancing past her shoulder. Dad's old sedan was still parked there, exactly where it always was. Dust covered the windshield. He hadn't gone anywhere. She didn't answer. She just looked at me, lips trembling like she wanted to tell the truth but couldn't. I stepped back onto the porch, breathing through my teeth. "Okay," I said quietly. "A drive." I got back in my car and parked at the corner, just watching the house. The same wind chime hung above the porch, the one I bought for Mother's Day years ago. It jingled a little, soft and lonely. Neighbors walked by with coffee cups, waved like nothing was wrong. I waved back, pretending to. After a while, my phone rang again. Nate this time. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Liv, just calm down," he said before I could speak. "Dad's fine. He's just sold it, didn't he?" I cut in. The words came out flat. "Come on, don't start that. You're blowing things up again." I laughed, but it wasn't really a laugh. He called me an idiot in front of a room full of people. Now the truck's gone. You tell me what's blown up. There was silence on the other end. Then he muttered, "He'll make it right." He always does. I hung up. I sat there until my coffee went cold, watching sunlight crawl across the empty driveway. Every few minutes, I told myself to just drive home, but I couldn't. It felt like if I left, the truth would harden and there'd be no undoing it. Mom came out once, looked around, then went back inside. She didn't see me. Her shoulders were slumped like someone who'd been carrying a secret too long. I finally started the car and drove off, but not home, just nowhere. The road out of town was quiet, lined with bare trees and the sound of my own breathing. Somewhere between the gas station and the old bridge, I stopped feeling shocked. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was something colder. He'd taken my gift, my effort, my gesture of love, and turned it into another punchline. And now all that was left of it was an empty driveway, and a silence I didn't plan to break. I was sitting on my couch that evening, staring at the wall, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number I still knew by heart even though I hadn't seen it in months, Caleb. For a second, I thought about ignoring it, but something made me answer. "Hey, Liv," he said, his voice careful, like he wasn't sure I'd hang up. "You got a minute?" "Yeah," I said quietly. There was a pause, the sound of a wrench hitting the floor in the background. I could picture his shop exactly. The smell of oil, the radio always playing old rock songs, his hands always moving. "Look," he continued, "I'm not trying to stir anything, but your dad came by a few weeks ago. He asked some questions that didn't sit right with me." My heart started beating faster. "What kind of questions?" He wanted to know how vehicle titles worked. Like, if someone bought a car or a truck as a gift, could the title be switched without them knowing? He asked about timing, paperwork, all that. I didn't say anything for a moment. The room felt smaller. I could hear my own breathing. "I didn't think much of it," Caleb said quickly. "I figured maybe he was helping a friend or selling his old truck. But then I saw your name on the paperwork when you bought that new Ford last week. It clicked." I swallowed hard. "He planned it," I said mostly to myself. "Liv," Caleb hesitated. "I think he wanted to sell it the second you gave it to him." The words sank in slowly like cold water. I leaned back on the couch, eyes on the ceiling. I'd spent months saving for that truck, working extra hours, skipping trips, cutting corners just to see my dad smile. And now I could see it clearly. He'd been preparing to turn it into cash all along. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked finally. "Because you deserve to know. And because I don't want you thinking you did something wrong." For a moment, I didn't trust my voice. "Thanks," I whispered. "I'm sorry, Liv," he said softly. "I really am." After the call ended, I just sat there in the quiet. The sunlight coming through the window had turned orange, throwing long shadows across the floor. Everything looked the same, but it all felt different. I got up and started walking around my small apartment, picking up random things, a coffee mug, a pen, a folded blanket, as if keeping my hands busy could stop my mind from spinning. I kept replaying the night of the dinner in my head. His smirk, the laughter, the way he raised his glass. It all made sense now. He hadn't been caught off guard. He'd been waiting. I went to the kitchen sink and turned on the tap, just to hear something other than silence. Water rushed down the drain while my thoughts kept circling the same truth. My dad didn't see the gift as love. He saw it as an opportunity. For years, I'd tried to earn his approval, thinking maybe if I gave enough, he'd finally look at me differently. But all he saw was what he could take. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt something colder, like a door had shut inside me. He wanted to play games with money and pride. Fine. I'd stopped playing the moment I learned the rules. I couldn't sleep that night. The more I thought about what Caleb said, the more everything lined up. My dad hadn't acted surprised at the dinner because he already knew what he was going to do. I needed proof, not guesses. The next morning, I called Mom. She sounded tired, like she hadn't slept either. I told her I needed to come by the house. She hesitated but finally said, "All right, Liv. He's out. Do what you have to do." When I got there, the place felt smaller. The curtains were half drawn, and the living room smelled faintly of old coffee and cigarette smoke. Mom was at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug that had probably gone cold hours ago. "He's been hiding things," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "You'll see." She slid a small key across the table. "It's for his desk." I went into his study. It used to be neat. Trophies from his old construction jobs, a shelf of car magazines, his name printed proudly on business cards that no longer meant much. Now papers were piled everywhere. I opened the first drawer and pulled out a stack of envelopes. Unpaid bills. Credit card statements. Late fees. Some letters had warnings printed in bold red. The deeper I looked, the worse it got. There were letters from the bank and one from a loan office threatening legal action. I kept going, flipping through the mess until I found a folded pink slip tucked inside a manila folder. It was for his old truck, the one he'd driven for years. The date on it stopped me cold, 2 days before his birthday. And the signature was already there, in his handwriting. He'd sold it before the party. That meant the new truck wasn't a surprise at all. He must have been counting on it, trading one vehicle for another, planning to flip it for quick cash. It wasn't about gratitude or pride. It was about money. Always money. I sat there, staring at that piece of paper until my eyes blurred. Around me, the room felt heavy with all the lies he'd built. He wasn't broke because life was unfair. He was broke because he couldn't stop pretending he was doing fine. He'd rather drown in debt than ask for help. Mom came in after a while, arms crossed tight over her chest. "You found it?" she asked softly. I nodded. "He signed it before the party." Her eyes watered, but she didn't cry. "He's been getting letters for months. He said he'd fix everything." I wanted to believe him. I folded the papers and placed them back exactly as I'd found them. "You don't need to cover for him anymore," I said. My voice surprised me, calm, flat, steady. As I walked out, I glanced around the house. It felt different now, like the walls themselves knew what he'd done. The framed photos, the trophies, the birthday cards, all of it looked hollow. Outside, I stood in the driveway where the truck should have been. The concrete was cracked, weeds growing through the lines. It looked tired, like the rest of us. For years, I'd tried to make things right for him, to fix what he broke, to keep our family looking normal. But standing there, I finally understood. He didn't want saving. He wanted control. I got in my car, closed the door, and didn't look back. The truth I'd found was ugly, but at least it was real. And for the first time, I wasn't scared of it. It was already dark when I made up my mind to go. The papers, the pink slip, the empty driveway. Everything had been spinning in my head all day. I needed to see him, to look him in the eye and hear whatever lie he'd try to give me. I didn't care if he denied it. I just wanted the truth to come from his mouth. The parking lot outside Murphy's bar was half full. The same rusty pickup trucks and loud laughter I'd grown up around. I could hear him before I saw him. His voice, that familiar booming laugh that used to fill our house when I was little. Inside, the air smelled like smoke and beer. A game played on the small TV behind the counter, and his friends sat crowded around the same table they always did. Dad was in the middle, holding court. His face was red, his eyes glassy. When he saw me, his grin flickered but came right back. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. I walked straight up to him. "Where's the truck?" He leaned back in his chair, pretending to think. "Truck? Oh, that." He laughed again, and his buddies chuckled with him, though more carefully this time. "You really can't take a joke, can you?" "This isn't a joke," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands felt tight at my sides. "You sold it, didn't you?" He took a long drink before answering. "Relax, Liv. You gave it to me, remember? A gift. What I do with it is my business." The room got quieter. Someone at the bar turned down the TV. All I could hear was the sound of my pulse in my ears. "You planned this," I said softly. "You asked Caleb about titles weeks ago. You were going to sell it before I even handed you the keys." He smirked like he was proud. "You always overthink everything. I just made a trade. Got something useful instead of a fancy toy I didn't need." "Something useful?" I repeated. "Like what? Another round for your friends?" A few people looked down at their drinks. Even his closest buddies didn't laugh this time. He leaned forward, lowering his voice but not his arrogance. You're too sensitive, Liv. Always have been. You try to buy affection, then cry when people don't react the way you want. Grow up. For a second, the old instinct kicked in, the one that made me shrink, apologize, try to fix things. But it faded as fast as it came. I looked at him, really looked at him, his tired eyes, his empty confidence, the mess he'd made of everything he touched. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said. I've grown up. I turned and walked out. No shouting, no tears. Behind me, no one spoke. The bar stayed silent except for the scrape of a chair. Outside, the air was cold and sharp. I stood by my car for a moment, breathing in the quiet. He thought he'd won. He always did. But this time, I wasn't the one walking away hurt. I was walking away with clarity. As I started the engine, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked calm, almost detached. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small around him. He'd taken enough. Now it was my turn to take back what was mine, piece by piece. A few days passed without a word from Dad. I didn't call him, and he didn't call me. The silence was strange, but I was getting used to it. I spent my time grading papers, cooking simple meals, trying to think about anything else. Then, one afternoon, Caleb showed up at my door, wiping his hands on a rag. "Got a minute?" he asked, looking uneasy. I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. He stayed near the doorway, shifting from one foot to the other. "I found something," he said. "About the truck." My chest tightened. "What is it?" He took out his phone and scrolled through a few pictures. "A guy named Dale came to my shop this morning. He runs a construction crew over in Maple Ridge. He said he bought a Ford F-150 from your dad last week. Paid cash. But he never got the title." I froze. "You're serious?" Caleb nodded. "Dead serious. The guy's angry. He said your dad promised to bring the title the next day, and then disappeared. He figured something wasn't right, so he asked around. When I heard the name and description, I knew it was your truck. My mouth went dry. Where's the truck now? He still has it. It's parked at his lot. He didn't want to drive it without the paperwork. I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. At least it wasn't gone forever. Can you take me to him? Caleb agreed, and a half-hour later we pulled up to a dusty yard filled with equipment and old vehicles. Dale was waiting outside his office, arms crossed, a deep frown on his face. He was a big man, sunburned and tired-looking. "Your Ray's daughter?" he asked as soon as I got out of the car. "I am," I said. He let out a short laugh that wasn't funny. "Figures." He told me it was his truck. Said his kid helped him pay for it. I handed him 35 grand in cash. Now I can't get him on the phone. He lied, I said simply. The truck's in my name. I bought it. It wasn't his to sell. Dale shook his head, muttering a few curses under his breath. "You have proof." "I have the title and the purchase receipt," I said. "I just didn't expect to need them this soon." He rubbed his chin. "If this goes to court, I'll back you up. I don't like being cheated." "Thank you," I said. "I'm sorry he dragged you into this." "It's not your fault," he said. "Some men can't tell the truth if their life depended on it." I stood there for a moment, looking at the truck. It still had the temporary tag, clean and perfect, as if it hadn't been touched. It was mine, but for a while it hadn't felt like it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and the documents spread out in front of me. I filled out a police report, attaching every bit of evidence I had. The signed pink slip, the buyer's name, the transaction details Caleb helped me confirm. When I pressed submit, a strange calm came over me. I wasn't crying or shaking. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was focused. My dad thought I'd just walk away like always. He didn't expect I'd know how to fight back, quietly, legally, and in a way that would leave him no escape. When I finally turned off the light, I looked out the window toward the direction of his house. Somewhere out there, he still believed he'd gotten away with it. But soon, he'd find out I wasn't the same daughter he'd always counted on forgiving him. It took about a week for everything to move forward. I kept checking my email, waiting for an update, and then one morning, I got it. The case was accepted, and a deputy would serve the notice within days. I didn't tell anyone. I went to work, taught my classes, smiled when needed, and came home like it was any other week. But inside, I was counting down. When it finally happened, I wasn't there to see it, but I didn't have to be. Word spread fast in a small town. Dad was sitting outside Murphy's bar with a few of his buddies when a county officer pulled up. They thought it was a parking check until the officer walked straight toward him, holding a thin envelope. People said he tried to laugh it off at first, but when he saw his name printed on the front, the smile dropped. The notice was for theft and fraudulent sale. Witnesses said he just sat there, silent, while the officer read him his rights. His friends looked away. Nobody joked, nobody cheered. By the time the officer drove off, the bar had gone quiet. He didn't go back inside. He just got in his old car and left. That night, my phone started buzzing. The calls came one after another, first from him, then Nate, then Mom. I didn't pick up. The more they rang, the calmer I felt. I set the phone on the counter and let it vibrate itself still. For once, I didn't owe him a response. The next day, Mom came by my apartment. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders slumped, eyes red like she hadn't slept. "He's falling apart, Liv," she said, sitting down at my table. "He doesn't understand how this happened." "He does," I said quietly. "He just doesn't like it." She took a slow breath. "He's embarrassed. Everyone's talking." "They're not talking because of me," I said. "They're talking because he got caught." Mom nodded but didn't argue. Her hands twisted in her lap. "He's been hiding things for months," she whispered. "I knew about the debts. I just didn't know how bad it was. He said he'd fix it, that it was temporary." I looked at her, this woman who'd spent her whole life trying to keep peace in a house built on his pride. "You can't keep cleaning up after him," I said. "He'll never stop if someone always smooths things over." Tears filled her eyes. "He said he felt small next to you," she said. "Like you made him feel useless without meaning to. You've got a steady job, a home, savings. He said it made him feel like a failure." I sighed. "That's not my fault." "I know." Her voice cracked. "But he doesn't." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The ticking clock filled the silence. Finally, she stood. "I don't know what's going to happen now." "Whatever it is," I said, "it's on him." She nodded slowly. "I think you're right." After she left, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. My phone buzzed again with another call from Dad. I didn't move to answer. Somewhere deep down, I knew he wasn't calling to apologize. He was calling to save face. He wanted to explain, twist the story, blame someone else. But I wasn't the daughter who used to bend. I wasn't there to make him feel better. I had drawn a line, and this time it would stay there. The courthouse smelled faintly of polish and old paper. I sat in the second row, my hands resting on my lap, trying to ignore the sound of my heartbeat. Dad sat across the room at the defense table, wearing his only suit. He looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders slouched, tie pulled too tight, eyes darting everywhere but toward me. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The sound of the gavel echoed once, sharp and final. Then the hearing began. Dad's lawyer started first, speaking about a family dispute that got out of hand. He said there'd been a misunderstanding, that no harm was meant, that it was a private matter that didn't need to be dragged into court. I watched Dad nod along, pretending to look regretful. When it was his turn to speak, he tried to smile, the same way he always did when he wanted to charm people. "Your Honor," he said, "I admit I made a mistake. But this is just between me and my daughter. Families argue. They say things they don't mean. I never meant to cause trouble." The judge listened without expression. "You sold property that wasn't legally yours," he said flatly. "That isn't a misunderstanding, Mr. Carter." Dad's smile faltered. He tried to explain again, saying he'd thought the truck was shared, that he hadn't realized the paperwork listed only my name. But the folder sitting on the judge's bench told the real story. The title in my name, the sale receipt, Dale's written statement, Caleb's note about the visit to his shop. When Dale was called to the stand, his voice was steady. He told me it was his, he said. He took my money, then disappeared. If it wasn't for Olivia, I'd have lost 35 grand. Dad's lawyer tried to twist the questions, but every answer made things worse. The truth was too clear to hide. Even his closest friends, the ones who used to laugh with him at the bar, sat quietly in the back, eyes down. When it was finally my turn, I stood up. My palms were damp, but my voice didn't shake. "Your Honor," I began, reading from the page I'd written the night before. "This isn't about money. It's about being treated with respect. I gave that truck as a gift, not as a chance to be mocked or taken advantage of. I'm not here to get even. I just want what's fair." The courtroom stayed silent. I sat down, and the judge looked over the documents one last time. Then he read the ruling. Restitution for the full amount, loss of vehicle rights, seizure of certain assets, and a fine. The words sounded heavy, final. Dad didn't look at me as the officer collected the paperwork. His hands trembled slightly. The confidence he'd carried his whole life, that easy grin, that sense he could talk his way out of anything, was gone. As we left, I passed him in the hallway. He opened his mouth like he wanted to speak, but no sound came. I kept walking. Outside, the air felt brighter, cooler. I took a long breath and looked at the sky. For once, there was no weight pressing down on me. He'd tried to laugh at me in front of others, and now he stood where I once did, exposed, embarrassed, powerless. But I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Some lessons don't need words. The truth itself is enough. Months passed after the court hearing. Winter turned into spring, and life slowly found its rhythm again. The chaos had quieted, but its shadow still lingered in small ways. A silence in phone calls, an empty chair at Sunday dinners that no one mentioned anymore. Dad packed up his things and left town not long after the verdict. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Mom said he'd sold what little he had left and drove off one morning before sunrise. When she found the note he'd left on the counter, it was only a few lines long. No apology, just excuses about needing a fresh start. She folded it up and threw it away without reading it twice. The house felt strange when I visited her after he left. For the first time, it was calm. No raised voices, no slamming doors, no jokes with sharp edges. The quiet felt heavy but peaceful. Mom moved slower, as if she was learning how to exist in her own space again. She told me she'd filed for separation and was meeting with a lawyer soon. "I should have done this years ago," she said, staring out the kitchen window. "He always made me believe he'd change." I nodded, not to agree or disagree, just to let her talk. Nate stopped by a few days later. He looked uncomfortable, standing at my doorstep with both hands shoved into his pockets. "Can I come in?" he asked. We sat on the couch, the air thick with all the things he didn't know how to say. Finally, he looked up. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I laughed that night. I didn't think about how bad it must have felt. I guess I was scared of him too. Hearing that surprised me more than anything." "I know," I said. "You were trying to survive the same way I was." He nodded, eyes glassy. "He made everything a competition. Even with you." "He did," I said. "But that's over now." We talked for a while, not about the past, but about what came next. He wanted to find steady work, maybe move out of town for a while. When he left, I felt something ease in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but relief. Later that week, I went to the DMV to finish the registration paperwork. The truck was officially back in my name. I picked up the new plates and drove to Caleb's shop to have him install them. He didn't say much, just smiled a little as he tightened the screws. "Runs better than ever," he said. I took it for a drive that evening, windows down, the air cool and clear. The road stretched open ahead of me, the engine smooth and steady under my hands. It felt different now, not a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I'd reclaimed. When I pulled into my driveway, I let the engine idle for a moment before turning it off. The headlights lit the front of my small house, warm and familiar. For years, I'd chased my father's approval, thinking it would make everything right. But sitting there, hearing the quiet hum fade, I realized I didn't need it. What I needed was peace, the kind that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to understand your worth. The truck, once a symbol of humiliation, now stood as proof that I could start again. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance, and finally driving my own road, without anyone else's hands on the wheel. It was late when Mrs. Brooks knocked on my door. She was holding a small tin of cookies, her way of starting a conversation. After some small talk, she hesitated and then said quietly, "I saw your dad a few weeks ago. He was sitting across the street in his old car. He didn't move for hours. Just sat there, looking at your driveway." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The image settled in my mind. Him sitting alone in the dark, watching the place where the truck once stood. I asked when it was, and she said, "Right before he left town." He looked tired, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. After she left, I stood by the window, the night air cool against the glass. The street was quiet except for the sound of crickets and a distant dog barking. I could almost picture him there, the shape of his shoulders, the way he used to lean forward when he thought too hard. For years, I had wanted him to see me, to understand me, to be proud. But now that need was gone. I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad in a calm way, the kind that feels like closing a door gently after too many storms. Maybe he had come to say goodbye. Maybe guilt brought him there. Or maybe he just couldn't stand knowing that I was fine without him. Some people can only love when they're in control. When they lose that power, they'd rather walk away than face what they broke. I turned off the lights and sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the house breathe around me. The keys to the truck rested on my nightstand, cool and solid under my fingers. That truck had started as a gift and turned into a weapon, but somehow it ended as a reminder. That peace isn't something you buy, it's something you protect. I whispered into the quiet, "You taught me one last thing, Dad. Don't buy love. Earn your peace." Then I stood, picked up the keys, and walked outside. The engine started with a low rumble, steady and strong. I drove off down the empty road, not looking back, the headlights cutting through the dark, the kind of dark that finally felt like mine. Do you think I did the right thing by walking away, or should I have given my family another chance? I'd really like to know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.